Welcome. Our guest today is David Collins. He is a former police officer and a pastor at Hope Community Church in Tucson, Arizona. David will be taking us through his amazing journey of visiting Africa and parenting kids and goats. These are kids that are homeless, living on the streets, no hope, no future, and through a very important program that David's involved in, they're giving these kids an amazing shot at life. And we're live. David Collins. Sir,
hey,
thank you, man. Thank you for being here.
Sure.
So awesome.
Sure.
So, I'm very excited, man. Very excited to have you. So, one of the reasons, and it's part of the intro video of this, is one of the reasons I wanted to have you is because of what we do for a living. You know, what I do for a living, which is jiu-jitsu. It allows me to, it introduces me to people that have phenomenal stories. And then I feel a little bit guilty not sharing those stories because I think that all of us could be inspired by hearing, you know, stories from people like you, you know. So I'm fascinated by you, man. I told you that this is why I wanted to have you here. So one of the things that annoys me the most is when people talk about like, I'm conscious, man. I'm global conscious. You know, it's like, I care about the planet. I care about other people. And it's like, oh, great. What do you do? I drive a Prius, you know, and there's really no essence to what they're saying. It's just, it's a cool thing to say is to, I'm global conscious, you know, I'm conscious about the suffering of other people. But there's no follow-up to that. There's really not. Another thing is every good deed that they do, it's for the gram. It's for the Instagram. They can't do, there's no good deed that doesn't go documented on Instagram, you know? And it's for the likes. It's like, oh, I gave this waiter $100 tip. Or I gave this homeless some food, and they want to capture it on Facebook, on Instagram, and it's not like that. So you did something that I thought was amazing, and you went to Africa to pair up kids with goats, and we're going to get into the details of how that works. But the only reason I knew about it is your wife mentioned it, or no, your wife took a picture of you coming back in the airport. That's the only reason we knew that you had done that. You didn't talk about it. You didn't advertise it. There wasn't, hey, look at me, good guy Dave, I'm going to do this. It was a mission that you believed in, and you went and did it, man. So tell us about this program, the Pairs Kids. First of all, tell us about what's a crisis in Africa with homeless kids.
Yeah. Well, I was only in one part of Africa, in East Africa, in a couple different countries, so I can't speak for the whole continent, but in general, there's a lot of struggle with AIDS. You know, a lot of these kids are orphans because their parents have died from AIDS. There's also famine and drought. So when I was there, the country that I was in was experiencing a pretty bad drought.
Which country was this?
I was in Ethiopia and Kenya.
Wow.
And so there was animals dying on the side of the road. Like the people are herding goats and cows, and their animals are dying because they don't have water. And they don't have food to eat because there's no water to make the plants grow. So a lot of animals are dying, therefore the people are struggling because that's their source of income and their source of nutrition. So yeah, it's a difficult situation, at least in the communities I was in.
That is crazy. And you showed me a picture when we got together to do this. You showed me a picture of Yemen from the airplane.
Oh, Nairobi.
Nairobi.
Yeah, Nairobi.
But you showed me a picture of Nairobi, and there is no green on that picture. And then I thought it was dirt, but you're saying it's super polluted, so it's it's pollution. So number one, there's no green in this picture. There are no trees. There's no vegetation, and their pollution is through the roof, and that's pretty common.
Yeah, well, the city of Nairobi, it's a big city. But I don't think they have like emissions testing like we have.
Yeah.
And so you're driving down the freeway and trucks are just pumping out nasty brown smoke into the air. And so it's a big city with a large population, and there's not a lot of pollution.
What kind of cars do they have over there?
Just regular cars. I mean, there's a lot of big buses or big vans transporting a lot of people.
Right.
But they have regular cars. They might look a little different than ours.
Right.
A lot of motorcycles. That's a public transportation. So we got on the back of motorcycles because you could get somewhere in 10 minutes that would take 3 hours in a car because they just weave through all the traffic to get you where you need to go.
That is so crazy, man.
Yeah, pretty neat.
So you go to Africa and you paired up with another gentleman that we're hoping to have here soon. What's his name?
Okongo Samson.
Okongo. So tell us about Okongo
Yeah.
Congo's project?
Well, Okongo's a Kenyan-born guy, but he lives here in Tucson, and he started a Christian ministry called Unite for Africa. So his goal is to help train up pastors and community leaders to help their communities grow, to have healthy churches that make more healthy churches, to bring in orphans and help them with all the care that they need, with education, with food and water, and just having a family. And so he established this ministry, and he's working with many people in many different African countries. And so our church supports him, and I'm friends with him. So yeah, we paired up over there and got to travel around to different villages and churches and schools and orphanages and stuff like that. And so it was amazing. He does a lot in his program. I can get more into the goats or...
Yeah, well, let's get into that. So you go to Africa, and so tell us what this concept is about pairing a kid with a goat and what that does for the kid.
Yeah.
I found it phenomenal that that's truly the way out for this kid.
Yeah.
To having a shot at life, right? To having a shot at education,
Right.
at being a decent human being, not being a slave.
Yeah, I was fascinated by it too, and being there and talking to the people, I got a better understanding. I was like, well, what's the deal? Why give the kid a goat?
So how does that work?
So in those areas, a lot of the people are goat herders. That's what they do to make money. And you have a lot of orphans because of whether it's war or parents have died from AIDS or famine or lack of medical care. And so you have a lot of orphans, and you have family or friends or neighbors who would love to take that child in, but they're struggling to pay the bills and survive already. And so it's hard for them to take in another person. It's an added burden on their home. And so the goat is multifaceted. It's really fascinating. So Unite for Africa finds an orphan, but they have to have an adult that is willing to walk with them. It's not just giving a one-time gift. It's a long-term commitment for this child to have an adult that says, yes, I'm going to walk with this kid and help them survive and succeed in life. And so the ministry makes sure it's well documented and they have good support around them. And then they pair up that orphan with a goat. It's a female goat, and so the female goat can produce milk that child and now the family that brings them in can drink or sell. The female goat can also produce babies, which multiplies this process. And Unite for Africa set it up that the first three babies that the goat has have to go to other orphans.
Oh, wow.
And to replicate this.
Right.
So it's helping others. So it doesn't just stop with one child. This is expanding and multiplying and exploding in a good way.
Yeah.
And so more orphans are getting goats. They can also sell the goat at the market to make money, or they can eat the meat. So it really makes this child a viable option to bring into someone's home.
Right.
And that a family willing to take them in because, well, they have a goat and that will help sustain the child and our family.
So how does this organization find the kid to pair him with the goat?
Yeah. So this organization has local people in every village. There's pastors, there's community leaders in each village that knows the people, just like you would know your family and your neighbors and your friends. They know these people. They're aware of who the orphans are. They're aware of who the great adults are who can walk with that orphan and mentor them and help them through life. So they're not just looking from the U.S. or even from a big picture of Africa as a whole. They have people
from within the community.
living
That's
in
so
the
powerful,
community.
man. What is the average age of this kid? Of this kids?
I don't know. I don't have the stats on that. The ones I saw were probably 4 to 7.
4 to 7.
They're young.
Now, 4 to 7-year-olds, and they were straight up homeless.
Yeah, as far as I know, yes.
That's so crazy, man.
There might be a family or a friend who might take them in all the time, or maybe just some of the times. But
Right.
yeah, you have young kids that don't have a place to stay.
That is so crazy, man.
Yeah.
The closest thing that I've seen to that in person is I was probably about 10 years old, and my parents took me to Mexico City for a vacation. Went to the pyramids, beautiful city. I wish I had been older to be able to retain more of that experience. But so we meet up this uncle that is that was a native from the local Indian tribes out there. So he was short, but he was a hard worker. Like, he walked all day, man. So he knew my fascination with pro wrestling, from even from that age. And Mexican pro wrestling is completely different from American pro wrestling. In Mexican pro wrestling, there's a tradition of the mask, the character that gets presented, and then it's a lot more acrobatic. You know, that people really get into it. People really get into it. So, for example, it's not just you like Hulk Hogan and then this other guy. There's this complete division in the crowds. So it's the rudos, which is the rough guys, and then the technicals, which is the technicians, right? So if you're a technician, you value character and the techniques that this person is applying, and in the matches, there's always an opportunity where the good guy shows, a moral compass, so he doesn't hit the guy when he's on the ropes. Yeah. Where the rough guy, he doesn't care. He doesn't, he'll hit you, he'll grab a chair and stuff. So it's really passionate. It's a really passionate crowd. But then on top of that, the rough people, the rudos, will statistically they'll sit on the upper balcony where the technicians have more money, or that's what is perceived, and they sit on the lower tiers, almost up to the ring. But so he took me to see this pro wrestling match. But before we went down to like downtown Mexico City, and we went to eat. And then he tells me I was a spoiled little kid. I was like I said, I was maybe like between 8 and 10. Can't remember the whole thing, but he tells me, he warns me. He goes, you're going to see little kids your age. Don't look at them. And to put it exactly what he said in Spanish, he said, they'll fuck you up. And I'm an old man. There's nothing I can do. I was like, oh, okay. So we're walking around, and when I tell him I'm hungry, so we'll sit down to eat. And we're eating at one of the local restaurants and stuff. And he just kind of like kicks my chair, and he goes, here they come. And I look up, man, and there is a pack of at least 20 kids. And they're moving through the crowds, and there's kids that are younger than me in that crowd, and they're clearly being protected by the older, and then there's kids that probably had to be 12, 13, 14. And this kid and I made a connection. This kid and I, he was my age, had to be my age, but he had this cut that went down the side of his face, like this. He was huge. Clearly a knife. It was deep. I mean, it was healed already, but it was the nastiest scar I've ever seen up to that point. And I froze, because this kid looks at me and I look at him, and I immediately forget what my uncle tells me about not looking at these kids, but I'm looking at him because it's at that moment, I realized, like, that kid is me. Like that could be that kid, and that kid could be me. Yeah. It's just a matter of what opportunities we have in life. Yeah. So we're looking at each other, and the kid looks at me, and I do the classical Florida smile, which is I do this, and the kid like looks at me, and he starts doing it too, where he's like, man, and he just walks past me, But it was a thing that I've never seen before, man. Just 20 kids walking by, and then I asked my uncle, I'm like, what's their story? He goes, they're homeless, they're fatherless, they're homeless, they're drug addicts, And as we walked around town, there was more of those groups that you just saw, And then there's sleep in the gutters. A lot of times they'll go to jail just to have a place to stay, and it's crazy, man. But in Mexico, I haven't heard of anything being stable like this program in Africa, Yeah. So it's crazy. I mean, it's a powerful thing to see a kid, because it's all in the eyes, and there's something about what you see in this kid's eyes. They're hardened. They've seen and they've done things that most adults in America would never think of, So the amount of suffering these kids have gone through, even at a young age. But all of a sudden to encounter a group of people that don't want anything from them, but in the contrary want to give them everything, want to give them an opportunity at life, teach them a trade, how to do a job, how to sustain themselves. But then what I think is the most powerful thing is give them an opportunity to put the spear down and ponder about life. Like we talked about, like the spiritual side of things. Historically, humans didn't do that until they had stability in their life. You see poetry and music and art could not appear until we had cities. And then once we weren't getting run over, eaten by the saber tooth or whatever it was. That's when we were like, oh, is there a God? What's a God? What am I? What's my purpose? So it's awesome that these kids will have that opportunity to have those thoughts, because it doesn't happen. It doesn't have to happen. If all you're thinking about is, will I make it through the night? Will I make it through the night? And do I have to defend myself? Or where's my next meal going to come from? There's no opportunity to have those thoughts. All you're thinking about is survival. The primitive instincts. So that's amazing, man. So how many kids did you guys pair up when you guys were there?
I think it was 3 or 4 that we actually gave goats to while we were there.
And what was their reaction, man, knowing that they were going to be paired up with this goat and go to the family here?
It was a little bit just kind of just calm, even keel.
Yeah.
They weren't super excited. They weren't super emotional. They didn't show that.
Right.
I'm sure they were inside. It's a huge deal for them.
Right.
And they're so young, maybe they didn't understand the significance of what was happening.
Right.
But it was a big community event. The adults are excited. There's people gathered around who are committed to support that child. So it's really a neat thing to see and be a part of.
That is so awesome, man.
Yeah.
That is so awesome.
Yeah.
Tell me about the meat incident.
The meat.
That is so crazy, because I've seen a bunch of documentaries where the local people, there's things that they do where it's normal to them.
Yeah.
And to the Western culture, it's like might be appalling. Or like, I don't know if I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
And there's always that test of how committed are you, to do this.
Yeah.
So they'll test you one way or another.
Yeah.
And you kind of went through that where they're like, hey, try this. So give us a meat story.
Yeah. So we were in a village hanging out with some of the local pastors there, and we had just given away some goats to orphans, and they said, okay, it's lunchtime. So we all got in the van and we pulled over on the side of the road. There's this what looks to me like a shack. Like we don't have that in the U.S. that I've seen, or that in this town that I'm around. And we get out of the van and we walk up to the shack, and there's a side of beef, a whole side of a cow, just hanging on this metal rack. It's not cooled. There's flies all over it. And
No.
I was like, wow, okay. We just walk right past it to the back to this dining area where there's tables and chairs, and it was pretty dirty. I don't think they have health departments and health codes there, and we all sit around 2 tables and gather around, and they bring us a platter that has a bunch of chunks of raw beef and then bread around it, and these dipping sauces or spices, and these local guys just start picking up the steak knives and chopping it, dipping it, and eating it. And my friend and I, there's another American there with me, my buddy Kurt, and we looked at each other a little shocked and surprised, and they're just going to town, and I was like, Kurt, we got to do this, and Kurt's like, yeah, let's do it. So we both grabbed a little chunk and threw it in, and it wasn't bad, I mean, that's just the way of life for them. That's normal.
Yeah.
But
did you get sick?
No, I didn't get sick. So thankful I didn't get sick. So that was the test. They were all watching to see what we would do. And then thankfully they asked the waiters to cook some up for us.
Oh, okay.
So they cooked some and brought some cooked meat to us.
But first, it made you eat
first
the raw.
It was the raw.
That is a test, man. That is always a test of the culture, right?
Yeah.
That is always a test. It happens to me, man. I mean, being straight up Mexican, I was born and raised in Mexico, but I still go over there, and there's always a test to see how Mexican you remain. There's always a test.
Yeah.
Change that tire, chop that wood, start the fire. It's always this little test, and it's like, just because I live in the U.S. doesn't, the challenges of life are the same. It doesn't change. But it's funny how people want to always test how man you remain, right? That's so crazy, man.
Yeah.
It's so crazy. Yeah. There was a couple of like awesome little videos, man, that you showed of like the local dances and the girls. What is the female culture like over there? Because there's a shop that you were telling me about. They're all about empowering women, because historically speaking, they're not really given a place in society over there.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, I went to different cities and villages, and it's different everywhere. So one of the big cities I went to is a highly Muslim population. And so you have the Muslim culture where the women...
what city was that?
That was Mombasa,
Mombasa.
Kenya. A lot of the women had to be covered up. They had the full garb on. And that's just part of their religion, their culture. There was other places where we were in villages that probably never heard of the Muslim religion, because it's just way in the bush or in the woods. So it's different where you go. But the empowerment shop was fascinating. There was this shop that is set up. It's a women's empowerment shop because of the culture. Women don't have as much opportunity for education or jobs or to get skills and training that they might need to survive, because typically their fathers or their husbands will provide what they need. But this was for women who were disabled or abused, and they work at a shop where they're taught job skills and they're given a paycheck, and they sew blankets and stuffed animals and sell them as souvenirs. And it's really a great shop. They have great products. They're beautiful. And these women are respected and well taken care of.
Really?
And they're given money to pay the bills, and they're given job skills. They're taught how to work, how to lead, how to do a job, and they have a skill that they can then pass on to others.
Were you shown like the average household over there? What the average person lives like?
No, I wasn't. I didn't see any households in that area where the women's empowerment
Right.
shop was. No, just walked through town.
That's gotta be so interesting, man.
Yeah, it's wild.
Dude, that is so awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Man.
Yep.
Did you have an opportunity of talking to any of these women, or?
We said hi to them. They were busy working, so I
Right.
didn't want to interrupt what they were doing. But as we walked in the shop, we said hi. So they have the shop side where someone like me could go in and look at the stuff and buy some things, and then right off to the side you have a table of some ladies working. They're going to town, and so we said hi to them, but didn't get a chance to really hear their story or get to meet any of them.
How did seeing a place like that, right? A place where I heard the story, and it goes hand in hand with what you're describing, what life is like over there. It was this video, and there's a guy. He goes and travels with this group of just, gather hunters in Africa, and this gentleman, and this guy keeps asking him if they have words for American words. So, for example, he says, "Do you have a word for vacation?" And the guy, vacation, and they kind of look around. They're like, "No, we don't have a word for vacation." And he explains to them what vacation is.
Yeah.
This in Africa, And the guy's, why would you leave why would you go somewhere else? Your family's here. Why
Yeah.
would you go somewhere else?
Yeah.
And he goes, no, you come back. And they just didn't make sense to them. Then he says he came up with the word insurance, and kind of explains to them what it is. And it's like, insurance. We have the old ladies that know how to set a bone, you pay them. So it's just a lot of things that we take for granted,
Yeah.
or what we want to demand, especially here in America, where in other parts of the world, it's like it hasn't even crossed their mind.
Yeah.
And one of the elders, I think that obviously older people get their fuses a little shorter. So this American guy keeps asking these questions about what words exist in their dialogue. So he goes, listen, today, and he shows him, he goes, today I have this spear and I have this bowl of rice. If I get hungry, I can cook this bowl of rice and I'll eat today. Tomorrow I have to go hunt. If I break my spear, I can't kill anything. So I eat today, tomorrow I hunt. The day after, if my spear is gone and my rice is gone, I might be dead because I can't defend myself and I don't have food. So 3 days, man, 3 days. They're guaranteed 3 days at the most.
Wow.
Yeah. So you having that experience of seeing how these people live, but also how this country is changing. How did it affect your perception of coming back to America and just having AC in your car, insurance,
Yeah.
safety, food?
Yeah.
Looking at your daughters, and knowing that nobody is going to come and oppress them, out of some religious belief. How did it change your outlook in life?
Yeah, your perspective is definitely different. We're so blessed here. We have most of us, and I definitely have everything I need and more. And it's humbling to go somewhere where people don't, where they're struggling to survive, like you gave that story and that scenario. It's humbling. It's challenging. It makes you thankful for what you have. I mean, I'm much more thankful for what I have, for my family and our health and our safety, and but also it just puts into perspective like what's really important in life. Is it cars? Is it nice clothes? or is it ultimately your faith in the Lord, or your health, or family? You know, what's really your priority? So that helps tweak your perspective. It did for me, that's for sure.
There's definitely that culture of the more, the culture of the more, I think especially in the Western world, right? Where we kind of get away a little bit from, you know, like the spiritual side of things, like you said, like just appreciating health and appreciating your wife and your kids and your friends and your loved ones. And it's about, I have a car, but I want a bigger car. I have a home, but I want a bigger home.
Yeah.
I want more. I want more instead of, and I'm not saying, you know, because I'm a firm believer in achieving things. I'm a firm believer in more through hard work and dedication, but not by looking away from what's important. You know, I think that's so important, man. It's like you hear the stories of people that lost their families because they went and tried to create some business, you know, and their business became their life, and they discarded their family, their wife and kids, and they achieved the money, but they lost everything over here. And then you hear that on the other side of the equation, people that I feel hide behind their wife and kids or the loved ones and don't go out and achieve things in their life. You know, well, you know, and it's kind of hard to say anything to them because they mask it very well to me. They say, well, I'm taking care of my parents. You know, that's not a pass for getting out there, making something out of yourself, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's definitely that balance, that experience in a world like that, like yours, like that experience that you had going to Africa and seeing how people are truly struggling, truly struggling. One thing that impressed me the most is how you were talking about how a country that is so set in tradition, like Africa, where they have the religion, where they have a very rich history, they are kind of open to start accepting new ideas. And it's a rough conversation, but you were talking about female mutilation, where that conversation is starting to happen, where they're starting to talk about maybe not doing it, the dangers of it. Okay, the topic we're going to talk about is female mutilation. So this is a very important and dangerous conversation to have. It's not till recent time that the conversation that's been accepted in African countries as far as the danger that it presents to female that go through the procedure. UNICEF talks about how women ages 15 to 49 in Ethiopia, which is one of the countries that we're talking about, 74% of the women have gone through this procedure. Women ages 0 to 14 years of age in Ethiopia, again, 24% of them already have been submitted to this procedure. A lot of these girls get shipped back from America. They come in as refugees and they get shipped back to Africa to have this procedure done. So we brought that up. Dave has a very interesting point of view on this, from the fact that through the education of that a lot of this priests are doing with local tribes, that the conversation is starting to occur where maybe they shouldn't be doing this. So we'll pick up right at that point. So female mutilation, it's a topic that they're starting to accept, to have a conversation about it. The scary part is a lot of African immigrants that come to America, they'll ship their girls back to have this procedure done, and then once a girl heals, they come back to America. And I found it interesting that a country that it's so set in their ways, it's willing to have this conversation. So talk to us about that.
Well, the group I'm with, I mean, it's all Christians, and so they and we believe that when Jesus Christ changed your life, when you become a Christian and you're made new, that's a new way to live. It's you're living with and for the Lord now, and so it changes everything. Now, you don't have to just totally ditch your old culture and traditions, but that's giving them an opportunity to say, well, okay, maybe everything we've been doing for hundreds of years is not the right way to go. And so this ministry is coming in and saying, hey, we know why you're doing it, but there's other ways to work on the girls and their promiscuity and the culture of that.
Because that's the whole purpose of it, right? So female mutilation is when they actually, or the purpose behind that is to, in their thought process, is to minimize the sexual drive of a woman as she enters from childhood to teenage years, right? But it's a brutal procedure. It's a brutal procedure that a lot of these girls don't survive. A lot of these girls are disfigured. And a lot of time it prevents them from being intimate in their adult life. So it's amazing that you guys are having that conversation with them. What is the reception though because you guys are providing with education as to, it's not just a casual conversation, it's an educational process to saying this is what it does to these girls.
Yeah, so I wasn't specifically involved in those conversations or trainings, but the folks that I worked with over there, the local pastors are there training and coaching and teaching, not just in spiritual things, but in physical and life things, and saying to these families, hey, we don't need to do that to our girls. There's other ways around that, like there's self-control, there's working on changing the heart so that the heart is right, instead of just mutilating the body to force something. And so the pastors are intricately involved in people's lives in their villages to help them work through those things. And the people are tending to be receptive to that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing,
it's
man.
really great.
That's awesome. So we have maybe a few minutes left. Let's talk about you, man. What are you working on? What's in the plate for Dave Collins? So you already did this trip to Africa. You're a very active pastor with the community. You had a very huge leap of faith where you went from working in law enforcement to you talked about how, and I think it's a phenomenal story, man, where you had a sit job, you were working in law enforcement, but your heart and your beliefs started taking you somewhere else, where you walked away from what people would consider, a career. But your heart was truly somewhere else. Your heart started calling you somewhere else. What was that experience like?
Yeah, I loved being a police officer. It was a great job. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed working with the guys. And I wasn't struggling in that job. I thought it was going well. But as I got more and more involved in the local church, there was more opportunities for me to lead there and step into other ministries that I felt more called to. And I don't know how to explain it. I just felt like the Lord was calling me to step away from law enforcement and be a full-time pastor. I'm not saying that being a pastor is better than law enforcement in general. That's not the case. I don't think one job is more holy or righteous than the other. But I just felt for me, with the Lord and where I was in life, that was a good move. And so, yeah, a lot of people didn't get it because I had a steady paycheck and good insurance and things were going well. So people are like, why would you leave that? But it's my faith in Jesus that was like, yeah, this is what I'm meant to do. I am on this earth to glorify God and let other people know about the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so if I can do that better as a pastor than I can as a police officer, which isn't always the case, but I felt at that time in my life that was a good move. And so in faith, I quit the police department and started working at our church.
Beautiful. What are you working on right now? What projects do you have?
Oh, a lot of different things. I mean, home groups, we see at our church, we see the need for community. You have a great community here at your gym. And we're all created for community. We need each other. And so at church, home groups is something that we call our groups that meet together in people's homes. That's a big priority for us. So I'm working on finding leaders who will lead home groups and getting people into those groups so that they have a sense of family and community. Because we all need each other in times of need. And even in good times, we need each other to grow and encourage each other and have positive relationships. So that's a big thing I work on. I work on local outreach, so what can we do here in our community here? So Africa's great, and what about here in Tucson? What are we doing to reach out to our neighbors or go downtown Tucson and help out with some homeless populations? So it's helping to provide spiritual need and also physical needs or educational needs or just helping our church be outward focused. Because a lot of churches will tend to focus inward, like how can we be strong and protect ourselves? But part of my job is how do we reach out to others in our community?
Yeah.
So those are two main, I mean, I could tell you a lot more things, but those are some of the big things I'm working on right now.
It's beautiful, man. It's like, I love to hear that. Like I said, one thing that that I've always told you, man, I find you a fascinating human being. Is it's that, man. It's the drive to try to make other people's lives better, you know. But also that quiet warrior mentality that you have. Where, like I said, it's a lot of people. They do these things for Facebook likes, and they do these things for Instagram likes, and for you, you did it. It wasn't advertised. It wasn't look at me like I'm abandoning. I'm leaving my wife and kids behind for this period of time. You know, it wasn't any of that. It was you know, and your wife's amazing, man. She held on to that family. She, you know, she brought the kids to practice. Not once did we see her like struggling, you know, and if anything, she was the most supportive wife that I've ever seen, you know.
Yeah.
But is that it was like it's the actions that you take to improve other people's lives, man. And it takes a lot of hard work, man. It takes a lot of hard work because not always will you be successful. You walk away with a heartbreak, but you recover quick, and then we start doing it again, man. So,
Yeah.
Dave, thank you for doing this, man. I appreciate that, man. Thank
Yep.
you.